Get out. You're fired, he said. So I slid one folder across the table and watched his face drain. You're lucky I hired you, he sneered. I didn't raise my voice when I answered because I didn't have to. You're unlucky I kept records. My name is Alfred, and I was fired in front of all my coworkers because I refused to play along with a vendor cartel that had been bleeding my company for years. I'm writing this because I still wake up some nights hearing the sound of a conference room door closing behind me. That soft click that says you are alone now, and everyone you thought would stand up for you is suddenly very interested in their shoelaces. I also know how these stories go online. Half of you will say, just quit, and the other half will say, call the authorities, and a small percentage will ask why I didn't punch somebody. I didn't punch anybody. I did something better. I documented. I waited. I held receipts like they were oxygen. And when the time came, I detonated the whole thing with policies, contracts, and a paper trail so clean it could have been used in a training video. I work in procurement, not the glamorous kind. The kind where you become fluent in the smell of printer toner and the language of per policy. And you learn that the words urgent request can be weaponized by people who don't want you to ask questions. If you've never worked in procurement, here's the simplest way to explain it. Everyone wants what they want, and they want it yesterday, and they want you to be the person who makes the rules disappear. The honest people see you as a gatekeeper. The dishonest people see you as a problem. I took this job because I actually believe in the boring stuff. Fair bidding, documentation, conflict of interest disclosures. The idea that if you spend company money, you should be able to explain why to anyone at any time without getting sweaty. I'm the kind of person who returns a wallet with the cash still in it. I'm the kind of person who writes down the time a conversation happens, even if it's friendly, because memory is a liar and people are people. When I started at Harrogate Systems, mid-size, not a household name, but big enough that a bad contract could burn millions, my boss, Victor Hale, seemed like a success story in a suit. He had that polished charisma that makes executives nod before he finishes speaking. He used my name constantly, like we were already friends. Victor, Alfred, you're exactly what we needed. You've got integrity. You've got standards. Me, thank you. I'm excited to tighten up process and reduce risk. Victor, that's why you're here. You're lucky I hired you. At the time, I took that as a clunky compliment. In hindsight, it was a warning label. The first few months were normal. I learned the existing vendor base, reviewed contract templates, cleaned up some sloppy purchase orders, standardized a few forms. I was the guy who built order out of chaos. People thanked me. Finance liked me. Internal audit sent a nice email about my helpful responsiveness. I was proud. Then I saw it, a duplicate vendor that mysteriously kept winning bids. It wasn't obvious at first. It rarely is. Procurement fraud doesn't usually show up wearing a shirt that says, "Hello, my name is crime." It hides in the small print and the rhythm of approvals. I noticed a pattern in competitive bids for facilities maintenance and IT equipment. Always just under the threshold that required higher level review. Always with emergency justification. Always routed through Victor's approvals and always awarded to one of two vendors I'd never heard of before I arrived. Northbridge Supply and Arden Field Services. Northbridge Supply looked normal on paper. Arden Field Services looked normal on paper. Their proposals were always competitive. Their delivery times always impressive. Their invoices always comprehensive. But the more I saw, the more my stomach did that quiet, tightening thing it does when my conscience smells smoke. It started with a simple cross-check. We had a vendor master file that contained addresses, tax IDs, contacts, bank accounts. I ran a quick duplicate search because I was doing cleanup. Two vendors, different names, different contacts, same mailing address. Same suite number. Same phone number, just different extensions. And their sales reps used eerily similar writing. I did what I always do. I verified before I accused. I asked accounts payable casually. Me. Hey, quick question. Northbridge Supply and Arden Field Services. Are they related? AP clerk, Maya. Not that I know. What? Me. Same address in the system. Maya. That's weird. But Victor approves everything. If he says it's fine, it's fine. That sentence, if he says it's fine, was the first crack in the glass. I pulled in corporation records using public sources. I checked their websites. Northbridge had a glossy site with stock photos of people in hard hats. Arden had a single page with a phone number and a tagline that sounded like it had been written by someone who wanted to sound like a company without actually being one. Solutions delivered. Always. Neither site listed leadership. Neither site had a real portfolio. I flagged it gently in my weekly report. Email to Victor, noticed potential duplicate vendor information between Northbridge Supply and Arden Field Services. Same mailing address/phone. Recommending we confirm relationship and ensure bids remain compliant with policy. Happy to do a quick vetting call. Victor replied in 3 minutes. Victor, email, no need. They're separate entities. Drop it. 3 minutes. No questions. No good catch. Just drop it. That's when I knew. Not that I knew the whole scheme, but I knew one thing with certainty. I had touched something that belonged to him. I didn't argue. I didn't reply with a lecture. I created a folder on my drive titled Vendor Verification and saved everything. Screenshots, exports, emails, timestamped notes. I also started doing something I'd always done, but more deliberately. I kept communications in writing. If Victor tried to pull me into a hallway conversation, I'd smile, listen, and then send a follow-up email. Email, thanks for chatting earlier. To confirm, you'd like me to proceed with awarding the maintenance contract to Arden Field Services under emergency justification, and you indicated the vendor relationship question is resolved. He didn't like that. I could feel it. A week later, I mysteriously stopped being invited to meetings. It was subtle. A calendar invite here and there that used to include me suddenly didn't. Someone would forward me notes after the fact with that chirpy, weaponized politeness. FYI, you weren't needed. Then my office was moved. I walked in one morning and my desk had a neon sticky note on the monitor. Sticky note. IT will relocate you. Please be packed by 10. No explanation. No conversation. Just relocation. They moved me from a small office near finance, the place where people actually needed procurement, to a cubicle in a back hallway next to a storage room where broken chairs went to die. It smelled like dust and resignation. Why I asked Victor, he didn't even pretend. Is there a reason my office was moved without notice? Victor, we're reorganizing. Don't be dramatic. I had confidential documents and contracts in that office. Victor, then you should keep better track of your stuff. The cruel move wasn't the office. The cruel move was the access. That afternoon, I tried to open our bid management system and got an error message. Access denied. I tried again. Same message. I checked email. No notice. No ticket. No explanation. Just the quiet suffocation of being cut off from the tools I needed to do my job. I called IT. IT Tech, Jordan. Yeah, your permissions were changed. It came from Victor. Why? Jordan, I can't see why. I can only see the request. Can you restore them? Jordan, not without his approval. So I emailed Victor. Email, notice my access to bid management and vendor master was removed today. I can't perform core job duties without it. Please confirm if this was intentional and advise how you'd like me to proceed. His response came 2 hours later. Victor, email intentional. You will support where needed. Support where needed. Translation, you will sit quietly in the hallway and stop looking at things. That night, I went home and told my wife, Claire, that something felt wrong. Claire, wrong like work drama wrong? Or wrong like dangerous? I don't know yet. Claire, what does your gut say? My gut says he's hiding something. Claire is the kind of good person who believes in the right way of doing things. She's a pediatric nurse. She's seen people at their worst and still offers kindness. When I told her I was documenting, she didn't roll her eyes. She nodded like she understood the language of survival. Claire, do not talk about this at work. Do not trust anyone you don't have to. I'm not trying to be paranoid. Claire, Alfred, being careful is not paranoia. It's wisdom. The next phase was reputation damage. It started as whispers. I'd walk into the break room and conversations would stop. People would look away, suddenly fascinated by their coffee lids. A coworker I used to joke with, Beth from operations, didn't meet my eyes when I said hello. She murmured, "Hey," like it physically hurt. Then I got pulled into a performance check-in with HR. HR rep, Denise, smiled so hard her face looked painful. "Denise Alfred. This isn't a formal warning or anything. Just to check in." Me? "Okay. Denise, we've received some concerns." Me? "Concerns about what?" Denise, "Professionalism, responsiveness, collaboration. Those words are corporate knives. They are vague enough to be anything and sharp enough to cut you." Me? "Can you be specific?" Denise, "I'm not at liberty to share names, but I will say people feel you've been obstructive." I kept my voice steady. Me? "Is this related to me asking for vendor verification on 2 companies with duplicate info?" Denise, "This is not about vendors. This is about your behavior." Me? "Then I'd like the concerns in writing with examples so I can address them." Denise, "We don't typically do that for informal check-ins." Me? "Then I'm not sure how I'm expected to improve." Denise's smile thinned. Denise, "Just be mindful, Alfred." After that meeting, I sent myself an email summary of what happened, with date and time, and I forwarded it to my personal email because I no longer trusted my access to remain intact. I also started printing anything important and keeping in a locked drawer at home. I didn't take confidential company data. I took my own notes, my own timelines, my own copies of policies and procedures that were not proprietary. I protected myself. Victor escalated with something darker. One morning, I opened my desk drawer and found a small gift card in a plain envelope. No sender. Just a sticky note that said, "Thank you for making this easy." My blood went cold, because I knew immediately what it was. It was bait. A trap. I didn't touch it. I stood up slowly and called Claire. Me, whispering they planted something in my desk. "Claire, don't touch it. Take a picture." Me, "I'm at work." "Claire, take a picture. Then go to HR calmly." So I did. I took photos from multiple angles, with my phone showing the date and time. Then I walked straight to HR with my hands visible like I was carrying evidence of a crime scene. Which I was. Denise was there. Victor was there. That's when I realized HR wasn't neutral. HR was part of his network. "Victor, Alfred. What's this about?" Me, "I found this in my desk. I didn't put it there. I want it documented that it was found, and I am refusing it." Victor, "Refusing it? That's funny. It looks like you already accepted it." Me, "I did not." Denise, "Alfred, are you saying someone planted it?" Me, "Yes." Victor, laughing, "Wow. Paranoid much?" I kept my voice calm, because I knew what he wanted, a reaction. He wanted me to look unstable. Me, "Please have Denise witness me placing it in a sealed envelope, and I'd like a written record that I reported this immediately." Denise hesitated. Victor's eyes narrowed. Victor, "No need. We'll handle it. Handle it. That's the corporate version of 'we will bury you.'" Denise took the envelope from my desk with 2 fingers like it was contaminated, then tucked it away, and I never saw it again. No report. No email. Nothing. That afternoon, an anonymous complaint was filed that I was accepting gifts from vendors. It was surreal. I got an email from Denise requesting a meeting regarding an ethics concern. I walked into the room and saw a printed copy of the complaint. It claimed I had received a gift card as a thank you for favorable treatment. It said a coworker had observed suspicious behavior. I asked for the details. Me, "Which vendor? Which contract?" Denise, "The complaint didn't specify." Me, "Who observed it?" Denise, anonymous. Me, "So, there is no evidence." Victor, "The evidence is the gift card, Alfred." And that's when Victor delivered the line like it was a punch. Victor, "We gave you a chance. Don't make us regret it." I went back to my cubicle and stared at the wall for a moment because I could feel the floor shifting under me. They were setting me up to be fired for cause. They wanted my reputation ruined, so I couldn't come back later with a lawsuit, or so no one would believe me if I did. This is the part where people like Victor win. Usually, they have the network. They have the vendors, the HR friends, the executive buddies. They have the ability to rewrite reality with an email and a meeting invite. But I had something else. I had receipts, and I had a moral allergy to back channels. So I did what I always do when a bully tries to corner me. I became boringly, relentlessly procedural. I sent a polite email to HR. Me. Email. Following today's meeting, I am requesting documentation of the ethics complaint, including any evidence and the specific policy sections allegedly violated. I am also requesting confirmation of the chain of custody for the gift card found in my desk at approximately 9:12 a.m. on date, which I reported immediately and refused. No response. I sent a second email, copying internal audit. Me. Email looping internal audit for transparency. I am requesting a formal record of the ethics complaint and chain of custody for the alleged evidence. Internal audit replied within an hour. Audit manager, Sam Alfred, we can set up a call. Victor called me 5 minutes after that. Victor, what do you think you're doing? Me, requesting documentation. That's normal. Victor, you're going around me. Me, I'm following process. Victor, process is what I say it is. Meh, no. Process is written. That's why we have policy. He went quiet for a beat. Then his voice turned soft, which was worse. Victor, Alfred, you have a family, right? My throat tightened. Not because it was a direct threat, but because it was a question no boss should ever ask in that tone. Me, yes. Victor, then stop. I ended the call and wrote a memo to myself of exactly what he said, with date and time. I sent it to my personal email. I printed it. I put it in my home lockbox. The flying monkeys arrived next. At first it was vendors calling me directly, which is not normal. Vendors are supposed to go through the procurement channel, not someone's personal extension with a vibe of intimidation. A man with a smooth voice called and said he was from Northbridge. Vendor rep, Alfred, right? We need you to stop delaying our invoices. Me, invoices are processed through accounts payable. Vendor rep, yeah, but you're the one asking questions. The company needs product. You're creating friction. Me, if you have concerns, put them in writing. Vendor rep, laughing, oh, he's one of those. Then he dropped his voice. Vendor rep, listen, people who cause problems tend to disappear. I documented it. Date, time, caller ID, exact gording. Another vendor emailed me from a personal Gmail account. Email, keep your nose out of other people's business. I forwarded it to my personal email, then forwarded it to internal audit and HR with a simple note. Me, email, receive the attached message today. Please advise how you'd like me to proceed. I am documenting for safety. HR replied with one sentence. Denise, email, please refrain from escalating routine communications. Routine communications. Threats from a vendor's personal Gmail were routine now. Okay. At work, coworkers avoided me. People who used to laugh with me in meetings now acted like they'd never met me. When I entered the cafeteria, conversations shifted away like a tide. I watched Beth physically change direction to avoid walking past my table. Then someone in Victor's network, started leaking performance concerns about me to leadership. I know because a director I respected, Martin, pulled me aside with that awkward kindness people use when they want to warn you, but not get burned. Martin, Alfred, off the record. Victor says you've been combative. Me, combative how? Martin, blocking vendors. Creating delays. Going rogue. Me, Martin, I have a folder of documentation. Would you be willing to look at it? Martin, I can't. I'm sorry. I could see fear in his eyes. Fear of Victor. Fear of the network. And my stomach dropped because I realized something. I wasn't just fighting one man. I was fighting an ecosystem of cowardice. That's when things got bleak. I came home one night, and Claire was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop open and her face pale. Claire, Alfred, did you apply for a loan? Meh, no. Claire, someone did. In your name. Me, what? My hands went numb. We checked our credit. There were inquiries we didn't recognize. A new credit card application. A phone account attempt. Someone had my social security number. Someone had Claire's maiden name. Someone had enough personal data to try to wreck our financial life. Victor had said, you have a family, right? And now my family was being touched. We froze our credit that night. We changed passwords. We set up fraud alerts. We called the credit bureaus. Claire cried quietly in the bathroom so our kids wouldn't see. I sat on the edge of the tub, feeling like I'd failed to protect the people I loved. Claire, is this because of him? Me, I don't know. Claire, Alfred, I am scared. Me, I'm scared too. We didn't tell the kids much, just that we were updating our accounts. But I started walking them to the car in the morning like we lived in a different world now, a world where my job could summon darkness to our doorstep. The next day at work, Victor greeted me like nothing happened. Victor, morning, Alfred. Me, do you have a moment to discuss vendor compliance? Victor, smiling still on that. He was enjoying it. He wanted me to feel powerless. He wanted me exhausted. He wanted me to quit so he could say, see, he couldn't handle the job. So I stopped trying to convince anyone with words. I started hunting patterns. Because procurement fraud always leaves patterns. Even without system access, I could still access some archive files, email threads, and share drives. I requested documents through normal channels, forcing them to respond in writing. I asked finance for invoice summaries for budget forecasting. I asked operations for delivery logs to reconcile service-level agreements. I asked legal for contract copies for renewal planning. Each request was polite. Each request had a business justification. Each request with a shovel full of dirt that looked normal until you realized I was digging a tunnel. And slowly, the picture formed. Bid rigging patterns. Identical phrasing across independent proposals. The same weird typo in multiple vendor quotes. The same paragraph structure, like someone used a template and forgot to change the bones. In one set of 3 bids, 2 different vendors used the exact phrase, turnkey integrated deliverables, in a way no human being naturally writes. In another, they both misspelled compliance as complaints. I built a comparison document. Side by side, highlighted identical sentences, timestamped metadata on PDFs showing they were created on the same computer. I didn't need system access to see that someone had been sloppy. Then I found a twist that made my skin crawl. One of the vendors, Arden Field Services, was owned by a shell company. That shell company's registered agent was a law office in a neighboring state. Normal enough, except the name on the LLC filing was familiar. It was Victor's spouse's maiden name. Not Victor's name. Not directly, but a name I had seen once, briefly, at a company holiday party when Victor introduced his wife to the executives and everyone laughed too loudly at his jokes. I stared at that filing for a long time. Then I saved it. Then I printed it. Then I checked again to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. The vendor cartel wasn't just bribes. It was self-dealing, conflict of interest, corporate theft dressed up as supplier relationships. At that point, I knew I was on a cliff edge. If I made the wrong move, they would crush me. If I made the right move, they would still try, but it would be too late. I needed a formal trigger, something bigger than HR, something that didn't belong to Victor's network. Internal audit was the best lever I had, but even they could be pressured. So I built something that couldn't be ignored, an airtight package that aligned with policy, procurement law principles, and governance obligations. I started with our own procurement policy and code of conduct. I highlighted the sections on competitive bidding, conflict of interest disclosure, vendor due diligence, and gift acceptance. Then I mapped evidence to each section like a prosecutor building a case. For every weird thing, I attached proof. Duplicate vendor address/phone, screenshot from vendor master dated. Proposal language similarities, side-by-side PDF excerpts, highlighted. Bid threshold manipulation. Invoice totals clustered just under review limits, charted. Emergency justification abuse. Email threads showing urgent without operational cause. Chain of custody issue on planted gift card. My immediate report email and lack of HR response. Vendor intimidation. Email from personal Gmail, call log notes. Personal retaliation. Access removal ticket. Office relocation note. Meeting exclusions. Identity theft attempts. Credit inquiry records, redacted for privacy, but enough to show timing. Then I added the smoking gun. The LLC ownership link to Victor's spouse's family name, plus a simple timeline showing when Arden started getting contracts relative to Victor's promotion. I didn't send this to Victor. I didn't threaten him. I didn't hint. I requested a formal audit through the established hotline, and I did it in a way that made it impossible to bury quietly. I sent it to internal audit leadership and copied the chair of the audit committee of the board because our company's governance structure included board oversight for ethics and financial risk. Yes, it was a big move. It was also the only move that made sense when you're dealing with a network. The day after I sent it, Victor tried to call me into his office. Victor, close the door. Me, I prefer to keep it open. Victor, close it. Meh, no. If this is a work-related conversation, I'm happy to summarize it in email. His face changed. The mask slipped. Victor, you think you're smarter than me. Me, I think policy is stronger than either of us. Victor, policy is paper. People are power. Then he leaned forward and lowered his voice. Victor, you're going to regret this. I looked at him and realized something that made me strangely calm. He couldn't scare me into silence anymore because he had already crossed the line into my family. He had already tried to destroy me. There was no peace available by surrendering. There was only delay. Me, Victor, I am documenting this conversation. Victor, smirking, of course you are. 2 days later, I was suspended pending investigation. They walked me out like a criminal. Denise from HR escorted me, smiling that same painful smile. Coworkers watched. Some looked away. Some looked satisfied. I saw Beth's face tight with discomfort, like she knew something was wrong, but didn't have the courage to say it. Denise, this is standard procedure. Me, for what? Denise, for an ethics investigation. Me, based on anonymous complaint with no evidence. Denise, we take all complaints seriously. I wanted to scream. Instead, I said, me, please put the basis of my suspension in writing. Denise, you will receive documentation. I never did. At home, the fear hit like a wave. What if the board ignored it? What if audit was compromised? What if Victor's network was bigger than I realized? What if I had just painted a target on my back and my family's back for nothing? Claire held my hand at the kitchen table. Claire, are you sure? Meh, no. Claire, then why did you do it? Me, because I couldn't live with myself if I didn't. That night, I got an email from an unknown address. Email, drop it or we will ruin you. No signature, just threat. I forwarded it to internal audit and the board committee chair. I didn't add emotion. I added one sentence. Me, email, received this threat tonight. Documenting in case it relates to the audit request. The next morning, internal audit called. Sam, Alfred, we've reviewed your materials. Me, okay. Sam, we're opening a formal investigation. Me, is it safe? Sam, I can't promise you anything, but the board has been notified. Then Sam said something that made my eyes sting. Sam, you did the right thing. I hadn't heard that from anyone at work in weeks. The investigation moved fast after that, and the speed told me the board was alarmed. Audit requested data extracts from IT directly. They interviewed accounts payable. They pulled vendor payment histories. They requested Victor's conflict of interest disclosures. They requested HR records regarding my performance concerns. They asked for the chain of custody record on the gift card evidence and discovered there was none. Victor tried to counterattack by flooding the system with noise. Suddenly, there were new complaints about me. Suddenly, there were claims I had hostile interactions. Suddenly, Denise found a memo about my lack of collaboration. But the more they pushed, the more they created records that could be checked, and their lies didn't line up with timestamps. Then the vendors started to crack. One vendor rep refused to speak without a lawyer. Another claimed they were just following instructions from Victor. One of them, a mid-level sales guy who sounded exhausted, told audit something I will never forget. Sales guy, we were told you don't question the bids. You submit them the way you're told. If you don't, you lose the account. Audit followed the money. They found that Northbridge and Arden shared not only addresses and writing style, but bank routing overlaps, payments to a consulting entity that didn't exist, and invoice line items that were vague enough to hide inflated costs. They found purchase orders split into multiple smaller ones to avoid review thresholds. They found emergency justifications that copied and pasted the same language across unrelated departments. Then they found a conflict of interest link. Victor's spouse's relative, through the Shell LLC, was tied to Arden. Not a rumor. Not a guess. A documented ownership structure. It wasn't just possible. It was real. When Audit confronted Victor, he tried charm first. Victor, this is a misunderstanding. These are legitimate vendors. Auditor, why did you order procurement staff to drop duplicate vendor concerns? Victor, I didn't. Auditor, we have your email. Dated date. Then he tried outrage. Victor, this is a witch hunt. Alfred has been trying to sabotage my department. Auditor, Alfred did not have access to the systems after you removed it. Victor, Auditor, your request to IT is also documented. Then he tried the last thing people like Victor try when the ground collapses. He tried to rewrite morality. Victor, everyone does this. This is how business is done. Auditor, no, this is fraud. It went to the board. I wasn't in the room, but I know what happened because Sam later told me, and because the aftermath was loud enough you could feel it through the walls of corporate silence. There was a board meeting where Victor walked in confident and walked out looking like a man who had just watched his own life burn in real time. In that meeting, the hook quote became prophecy. Victor apparently tried to frame me as the problem. Victor, he's unstable. He's been accepting gifts. He's been... Board chair, Victor. Stop. Victor, you're lucky I hired him. Board chair. And you're unlucky he kept records. When Sam repeated that line to me later, I laughed once, sharp, disbelieving, and then I cried. Not because it was poetic, but because someone powerful finally said out loud what I had been living. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't paranoid. I was right. They called in outside counsel. They involved regulators. They considered referral to law enforcement. I'm not going to pretend I know exactly what letters went where, but I do know the words State Attorney General and Federal Inquiry were spoken in serious voices. I know debarment was discussed for the vendors. I know finance started combing through past years like archaeologists digging up bones. Victor tried to save himself at the end, because villains always do. He sent me an email from his personal account. Victor, email, Alfred, I want to resolve this like professionals. Mistakes were made. Let's talk. Mistakes were made. The passive voice of cowards. I didn't reply with anger. I replied with calm. Me, email, all communications should go through counsel and internal audit. I will not engage in off-record discussions. Then he tried another tactic. He offered me money. Victor, text message, name your number, and go away. I took a screenshot. I forwarded it to Sam and outside counsel. Then he tried to threaten again. Victor, text message, you think you won? You will never work in this town again. It was almost funny by then, how predictable he was. Like watching a trapped animal cycle through instinctive moves. What Victor didn't understand was that procurement is a small world. Yes, but it is also a world that runs on trust. And people in that world love one thing more than gossip, proof. When I later interviewed for a new role, I didn't have to trash Victor. I simply explained that I had been involved in a major compliance matter and could not discuss details, but that I had been commended for documentation and ethical conduct. The right people understood. The company reinstated me with back pay within 3 weeks of the suspension. HR sent a short email that tried to make it sound like this was all normal. Denise, email, your suspension has been lifted. Please report to work Monday. No apology. No acknowledgement. Just bureaucracy trying to pretend it didn't just attempt to bury me alive. I walked in Monday and my old office was empty. Victor's nameplate was gone. His assistant's desk was cleared. People whispered in corners like the building itself had learned a new language. Beth approached me near the coffee machine, eyes shiny. Beth, Alfred, I'm sorry. Me? For what? Beth, for avoiding you. I was told things. Me, who told you? Beth, Denise. Victor, they said you were taking bribes. I nodded slowly. Me, do you understand now why I needed everything in writing? Beth, yes. Me, then remember it the next time someone tries to make you do their dirty work. The vendors disappeared from our system one by one, like lights going out. Northbridge, mark do not use. Arden, mark do not use. Several others were put on hold pending review. Operations panicked briefly because they'd relied on those vendors, and that was part of the cartel's power, dependency. But legitimate vendors exist. Honest competition exists. We transitioned. It was painful, but it was real. Victor tried one last time to look redeemable in front of the executives, I heard. He claimed he lost control of the vendor process. He claimed he was too trusting. He claimed his spouse's relative owning a vendor was a coincidence he didn't understand. He even tried to say he was sorry for how I was treated. But you cannot apologize your way out of a deliberate pattern. You cannot unsteal money by saying you were stressed. You cannot unthreaten a family by pretending you were joking. The board didn't buy it. Victor was terminated for cause, not a quiet resignation. For cause, the kind of firing that follows you like a shadow. The kind where your access is cut immediately and security walks you out. I know because I saw it. He walked past my hallway cubicle, the same one he shoved me into, and his eyes met mine. For a second, I saw the real Victor, not charismatic, not polished, just empty and furious. Like a man who had built his identity on being untouchable and couldn't process being touched by consequences. Victor, you think you're a hero. Meh, no. Victor, you ruined my life. Me, you ruined your life. Victor, I can fix this. Meh, no, you can't. He opened his mouth like he wanted to spit something poisonous, but security was right there, and he knew he was out of moves. He looked away. He disappeared. Denise resigned shortly after. Not because she suddenly grew a conscience, but because her name was in too many emails, too many meeting invites, too many smiles hiding too much. People like Denise don't usually get dramatic endings. They just slip into another company and repeat the pattern until someone catches them again. But she was gone, and the air felt cleaner without her. The aftermath was messy in the way truth always is. There were audits, retraining, policy updates, vendor reviews. Executives had to admit they'd been lazy. People had to admit they'd been cowardly. Some of them avoided me because my presence reminded them of their silence. That was fine. I didn't need them to like me. I needed the system to be honest. And the system, for once, bent toward justice. The company offered me a promotion, Director of Procurement Compliance, a role with more authority, more visibility, and direct reporting to a governance committee instead of a single boss who could choke access on a whim. They wanted me to rebuild trust, and maybe they wanted to use me as a symbol. Look, we did the right thing. I accepted, but with conditions in writing. Because that's who I am now. Maybe who I always was, but sharpened by pain. Me, email to board liaison. I accept pending confirmation of reporting structure, access protections, and anti-retaliation enforcement. I will require direct escalation path to audit committee in case of future interference. They agreed. Claire and I celebrated quietly, not with champagne and speeches, but with a simple dinner and our kids laughing at the table, and the knowledge that the threat had passed. Our credit stabilized. The fraud attempt stopped. Whoever had tried to weaponize our personal information realized the game was over. Some nights, Claire still checks the door locks twice. Some mornings, I still feel my shoulders tighten when I open my email. Trauma doesn't leave on schedule. But every time I walk into my office now, the real office with a door that closes because I choose it, not because someone wants to isolate me, I remember the moment Victor thought he could erase me with a staged complaint and a planted gift card. And I remember what stopped him. Not violence, not revenge fantasies, receipts, documentation, policy, the unsexy power of written truth. People keep asking me if I was scared. Yes, I was terrified, but I was also stubbornly, painfully committed to being the kind of person I want my kids to become. The kind who does not accept a gift card to make something easy. The kind who does not look away when a duplicate vendor keeps winning bids. The kind who does not let a bully with a network convince him that wrongdoing is normal. If you're in a workplace right now where someone is doing something that makes your stomach tighten, listen to that. Start writing things down. Keep everything in email. Save copies of policies. Create a timeline. Do not play their back-channel game. Because people like Victor count on you being tired. They count on you wanting peace more than truth. I wanted peace too. I just realized the only peace worth having is the kind you can live with. If you've ever watched injustice unfold at work, if you've ever been isolated for doing the right thing, if you've ever had someone try to destroy your reputation because you wouldn't break policy for them, please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel and come hang out with us on the playlist Reddit AITA and relationship drama. All the drama, none of the scrolling. The best threads from the internet, read calmly. Edit 1. A lot of you are asking why I didn't leave sooner. It's complicated. When you're the one who sees the problem, you also see the risk of leaving it behind for someone weaker to get crushed by it. And I needed to protect my family financially before making any sudden move. Edit 2. Yes, I did consult an attorney once the identity theft attempts began. I'm not sharing legal strategy here, but I will say this. Documenting threats and keeping calm records matters more than most people realize. Edit 3. For everyone saying HR is not your friend, you are correct. HR's job is to protect the company. Sometimes that aligns with protecting you. Sometimes it aligns with protecting the person hurting you. Act accordingly. Edit 4. I didn't expect this to blow up. I'm trying to answer questions without doxing myself or the company. I'm changing names and a few identifying details. The patterns are real. When I walked back in after reinstatement, the building felt like a theater after the lead actor quits mid-run. Same set, same props, entirely different tension. People were careful around me, too careful. Like I was a smoke detector that had gone off once, and now everyone was pretending they didn't hear it. The funniest part is how quickly Alfred is difficult turned into Alfred is so thorough. Thorough. That's what they call you when the narrative flips. My new title came with a better office and a better reporting line, but it also came with a simple truth. A cartel doesn't disappear because one man gets fired. It disappears when the system stops feeding it. And the system was still hungry. The first week, operations called 3 times about critical deliveries from one of the vendors audit had suspended. They were panicking because, shocker, their processes had been built around those vendors for years. Dependency had been part of the scheme. It wasn't just money. Victor's network had embedded itself into how work got done. I made a rule on day 1. No emergency justification unless a building is literally on fire. People didn't like that. People never like it when the shortcut gets removed, even if the shortcut was a trapdoor. I held a meeting with the department heads and internal audit present because I was done having meetings where the truth got misunderstood later. Until vendor review is complete, any purchase orders associated with Northbridge Supply, Arden Field Services, or their affiliates are frozen. Operations Director, we can't function like that. You've been functioning on fraud. You can function on real vendors. IT Director, we already have systems dependent on certain parts. Then we're going to do this the hard way, once, and stop paying twice for the same thing forever. Finance, bless them, actually looked relieved. They were the ones who'd been drowning in inflated invoices while being told to stop asking questions. We started the cleanup. It was ugly. It turned out Victor's cartel wasn't one giant obvious scheme. It was a garden of smaller schemes. Inflated invoices with vague line items like consulting support and optimization fee. Duplicate charges accidentally billed through multiple vendor entities. Purchase orders split into smaller ones to avoid review thresholds. Bid packages written so only one vendor could qualify, with oddly specific requirements like must provide same-day delivery from a warehouse within 12 miles of site, when no legitimate warehouse existed. Independent proposals that were basically copies with different logos. Audit pulled 3 years of data. 3 years. I watched Sam present a preliminary summary to the audit committee, and I felt physically sick. Not because I was shocked, my gut had been right from the beginning, but because of the scale. The company hadn't just been overpaying. It had been systematically looted. And then came the vendor debarment dominoes. For anyone unfamiliar, debarment is the professional equivalent of being exiled. It's when an organization formally declares you cannot do business with them because you're a risk, unethical, or fraudulent. It's a scar. The board wanted blood, but they wanted it clean. Not mob justice, governance justice. So we did it by the book. We issued cause letters to vendors. We requested documentation, proof of work, proof of materials, proof of subcontractors, proof of bid independence. We gave them deadlines. We created a formal process so no one could later argue unfair treatment. And that's when the vendors started calling again. Only this time, the intimidation shifted into desperation. Northbridge rep, Alfred, please. We've worked together for years. Me, you've worked with Victor. I've never worked with you. Northbridge rep, we can make this right. Me, put it in writing. What exactly are you offering to make right? Northbridge rep, me, I'll wait. They didn't want writing. Writing is how their world collapses. One vendor sent a clarification package that was literally a PDF full of screenshots of text messages. They thought it would help them prove instructions had been given. It did help, just not the way they hoped, because the texts were between their owner and Victor. And Victor's number was right there. Sam forwarded it to outside counsel with the kind of glee auditors pretend they don't feel. Outside counsel. This is very helpful. Me, for them. Outside counsel, for us. Then came the shell companies. Once audit had pulled the thread on Arden's ownership, the whole sweater started unraveling. We found 2 more vendors with ownership trails that led back to Victor's spouse's relatives. One of them was a consulting firm that billed us for process improvement while we were actively getting worse. There was even a vendor that was basically a mailbox. No real office. No real staff. Their team photos on their website were stock images. Their invoices, however, were very real. A week later, I got my first anonymous apology email. Email, I'm sorry. I didn't know how bad it was. I was told you were stealing. I avoided you. I regret it. No name. No details. Just shame in pixels. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted revenge, but because apologies without accountability are just guilt trying to be comfortable. Then I got the second email. Email, I worked with Victor. I can confirm he directed vendors to contact you to intimidate you. HR knew. Please protect me. This one did have a name. It was from a junior coordinator in operations, a quiet person who had always looked like they wanted to disappear into the carpet. I sat in my office for a long time before responding because I felt the weight of it. This person was stepping out of the cartel shadow, and stepping out is dangerous. I forwarded it to Sam and outside counsel immediately. Me, to coordinator, thank you. Do not discuss this with anyone except audit/counsel. Keep everything you have. You're doing the right thing. The coordinator replied, I'm scared. I didn't give them a pep talk. I gave them what fear needs most, clarity. Me, so am I. That's why we document. And then Victor tried his final gambit, public humiliation. Not in the dramatic TV press conference way, in the corporate way, which is worse because it's plausible deniability wrapped in calendar invites. Here's what happened. A month after he was fired, a special all-hands appeared on everyone's calendar. It was titled Values and Ethics Reset. It was hosted by the CEO and HR leadership. People assumed it would be a generic pep talk, a corporate cleanser. The CEO had to be seen doing something, and HR needed to scrub the smell of what they'd enabled. I sat in the back of the auditorium, not because I was hiding, but because I've learned the safest place to observe is where you can see the whole room. The CEO started with the usual. CEO, we have recently identified serious violations of our ethics standards. We are taking swift action. We value integrity. Then HR stepped up. Not Denise, she was gone, but her boss, a man named Randall who had the personality of a closed filing cabinet. Randall, we want to remind everyone of our gift policy. I felt my spine tighten because gift policy was my trap. Gift policy was the planted envelope. Gift policy was the false complaint. And then, Randall said the line that told me exactly what was happening. Randall, we have learned that even well-intentioned employees can sometimes cross lines without realizing it. I knew where this was going. It was subtle, but it was a smear. A quiet way to make people think maybe Alfred still did something wrong too. A both sides narrative that protects the company by making wrongdoing seem like a diffuse cultural issue rather than targeted, retaliatory campaign enabled by HR. And then came the slide. A slide titled Common Red Flags. Under were bullet points like insisting on unnecessary documentation, delaying approvals, creating adversarial relationships with vendors, escalating concerns outside normal reporting lines. I stared at the screen, and the room went fuzzy around the edges because I realized they were describing me. They were taking my survival tactics, my ethical tactics, and reframing them as suspicious. Randall wasn't saying my name. He didn't have to. In corporate, you don't accuse someone directly. You teach a lesson that makes everyone look sideways at them. I felt heat rise up my neck. I could hear Claire's voice in my head. Calm. Careful. Writing. So I didn't stand up and rage. I did something more effective. I raised my hand. Randall looked surprised. People rarely ask questions at all hands. People like to survive. Randall. Yes, Alfred. Me. Steady. Can you clarify that slide? Specifically, are you suggesting that insisting on documentation, following bid policy, and escalating to internal audit are red flags? Randall. No, of course not. We're just. Me. Because our procurement policy requires documentation. And our code of conduct explicitly encourages escalation when normal reporting lines are compromised. The CEO shifted behind him. You could see the calculation. This could become a moment. Randall, we're speaking generally. Me. Then I'd like it stated clearly for the room. Documentation is not suspicious. It is required. Silence. And then the CEO, perhaps to his credit, perhaps because he realized the optics, stepped in. CEO, Alfred is correct. Documentation is required. We are grateful when employees follow policy. Randall's face tightened like a lid being screwed on. But it was too late. The room had just watched HR get corrected publicly. And that's when the twist happened. A woman stood up 2 rows in front of me. I didn't recognize her. She wore a blazer and the expression of someone who had nothing left to lose. Woman, I have a question. The CEO nodded, cautious. Woman, are we going to address retaliation? Because I watched what happened to Alfred. And if you want people to report ethics concerns, you're going to have to stop punishing them. You could hear a breath move through the room like wind. Randall tried to respond with corporate fluff. Randall, we have processes. Woman, your process tried to fire him. Someone in the back murmured, she's not wrong. The CEO's smile became a strained mask. CEO, we are reviewing our HR procedures. Woman, good. Because my team has concerns too. And then, like a chain reaction, another hand went up. Then another. People started asking about vendor relationships that always seemed pre-decided. Managers pressuring staff to keep it off email. Sudden access removals when someone asked questions. HR informal check-ins used as intimidation. It was like watching a dam crack. The cartel had created a culture of fear, and now the fear was turning into anger. Randall tried to stop the bleeding by ending Q&A early. So, we're out of time. Voice from the crowd. No, you're not. The CEO glanced at his watch, then at the room, then at Randall. He made a decision. CEO, we'll stay for 5 more questions. I didn't ask another question. I didn't need to. The humiliation Victor wanted from me had boomeranged into humiliation for HR. Because here's the thing. Victor may have been fired, but his network had left fingerprints everywhere. And people could feel it. They could feel the manipulation that had been normalized. They could feel the way fear had been used as management. After the all hands, my inbox filled with messages. Some were apologies. Some were careful offers of support. Some were interesting. One message came from legal. Legal counsel. Alfred, can you come by? We need to discuss vendor remediation. That's corporate language for, we need you to help clean up the blood without leaving more fingerprints. I met with legal and outside counsel for 3 hours. They wanted to know exactly what I had, how I obtained it, and what else might surface. They wanted to know if Victor could claim retaliation or wrongful termination. Yes, villains do that. They wanted to know if the company faced exposure for the identity theft attempts. They wanted to know how far the vendor fraud might extend. I answered carefully, factually. Then outside counsel asked me a question that made my stomach drop. Outside counsel, did you ever report the family threat to law enforcement? Me, not formally. We froze credit. We documented. We gave records to audit. Outside counsel, you may want to consider it. Me, because of him. Outside counsel, Because if it's connected, it's not just corporate misconduct. I went home and told Claire. Claire, I hate this. Me, I know. Claire, do you regret it? Meh, no. Claire, then we keep going. We did file a formal report about the identity theft attempts because I wanted it on record outside the company. I'm not going to give details here, but I will say, making it official felt like taking oxygen back. Meanwhile, the vendor debarments went out, and that's when the world outside the company started reacting. Vendors talk to vendors. People in that ecosystem know each other. A debarment letter is a flare in the night sky. Suddenly, I got a LinkedIn message from someone I didn't know. Message: heard you're cleaning house. If you need help rebuilding your vendor pool, I can recommend reputable suppliers. Another message: I used to work with Victor. Please be careful. He's not done. That one sat in my chest like a stone. Because I realized something else. Victor's ego would not accept being beaten by paperwork. He would need a narrative where he was the victim. He would need to paint me as a crusader gone rogue, a disgruntled employee who misinterpreted normal business. He tried. It started with rumors outside the company. A recruiter friend casually mentioned hearing I was involved in an ethics incident. Someone in my industry asked me at a networking event, "So, what happened over there?" With that look that says I'm trying to decide if you're radioactive. Victor was building a smear campaign using his old executive buddies and vendor contacts, trying to make me look like a problem. And that's when I made the decision that changed the rest of my career. If I stayed inside Harrogate forever, my reputation would always be tied to that scandal. Even if I was vindicated, people would whisper. And more importantly, I didn't want my family living inside a company's crisis management cycle. I wanted control, so I built an exit plan. Quietly, I kept doing my job. I rebuilt procurement controls. I implemented stronger vendor vetting. I created a conflict of interest certification that had to be signed quarterly by anyone in a decision role, not annually. I standardized bid templates and added required originality declarations for vendors. I created audit triggers for bid threshold manipulation. I added a no off-platform communications clause for vendor dealings, and I enforced it. And every time someone said, "This is too strict," I'd say, "Me. Then it will be easy to comply." But I also started laying groundwork for something else. Independence. A consulting firm. Not a scam. A real one. Compliance and procurement integrity consulting. The kind of work where companies hire you after they've been burned and suddenly realize ethics isn't a slide deck, it's a system. Because the weirdest part of this whole experience was discovering how many other companies were quietly dealing with similar issues. When word started to leak that Harrogate had dismantled a vendor cartel, I got calls. Not direct, not official. Carefully. A friend of a friend. "Can you look at something for us? We have a vendor that always wins, and we can't figure out why." A former colleague. "Our procurement lead keeps insisting we keep it verbal. Is that normal?" A stranger. "I saw your name in an internal memo about policy reform. Are you available to consult?" Available. That word hit me like a door opening. Meanwhile, Victor made his last, stupidest move. He tried to file a complaint against me with an external professional association, claiming I had breached confidentiality and harassed vendors. He wanted to drag my name into a public ethics dispute so he could muddy the waters. If he couldn't win, he could at least make it look like everyone was dirty. The association contacted me for a statement. I didn't panic. I smiled, actually, because if there's one thing I had, it was documentation. I responded with a package so clean it should have had a ribbon, a timeline of events, copies of policy sections relevant to my actions, emails showing I kept communications professional and in scope, proof that I had escalated through legitimate channels, internal audit board committee, a note from outside counsel confirming I was not in breach of confidentiality, evidence of vendor intimidation attempts. And then, because I was done being gentle, I included the text message Victor had sent. "Name your number and go away." I didn't editorialize. I didn't call him names. I let his own words describe him. The association closed the complaint in under 2 weeks. I later heard, through industry gossip, that Victor had tried the same tactic against 2 other people in the past. This time, it didn't work because the target wasn't isolated. He underestimated what happens when the quiet rule follower learns how to fight. The final act was the board meeting meltdown. I wasn't present, but I was invited to provide a summary of remediation work, and Sam filled me in afterward because auditors live for this kind of story like it's oxygen. Victor's lawyer apparently requested to address the board as part of severance dispute resolution. Victor wanted money. He wanted to claim wrongful termination. He wanted to portray himself as scapegoated for a vendor misunderstanding. The board allowed a short statement. Victor walked in like he was still the man in charge. He wore a suit that screamed expensive, and he carried a binder like he was trying to cosplay as me. He began with the confident tone of someone who thinks charisma can rewrite math. Victor, I dedicated years to this company. I built vendor relationships that saved us time and money. I was terminated without fair process. Board chair, you were terminated with documented cause. Victor, that documentation was produced by Alfred, who had personal grievances, and board chair, stop. We have independent audit findings, external counsel findings, vendor correspondence, financial analysis. Victor tried to pivot. Victor, we can all agree there were misunderstandings, but I believe the company owes me. And then one of the board members, a woman who had been silent until then, cut him off with a calm voice. Board member, Victor, did you or did you not have a personal relationship with ownership of Ardenfield Services? Victor laughed like she'd said something ridiculous. Victor, my wife's family owns many businesses. That's not my problem. Board member, did you disclose it? Victor, I didn't think. Board member, did you disclose it? Victor's mouth opened, closed. Victor, no, that was it. That was the moment the room turned. Because in governance terms, that's not a mistake. That's a violation. Victor tried to salvage it by attacking me again. Victor, Alfred is a bureaucrat who weaponized policy. Board chair, he followed policy. You broke it. Victor slammed his binder on the table. Sam said it sounded like a gunshot in the quiet. Victor, you're lucky I hired him. And the chair delivered the line that still gives me chills because it was so perfectly deserved. Board chair, and you're unlucky he kept records. Victor's face changed. Something broke. Not in a sad way. In a cornered way. He tried to threaten, right there, in front of the board. Victor, this will ruin you. You think this ends here? I have friends. The chair didn't flinch. Board chair, then you should call them. Because we're calling ours. Sam said outside, counsel asked Victor's lawyer to remove him. Security was in the hallway. Victor left, still muttering about lawsuits. And then the board did something I didn't expect. They asked me to speak. Not to defend myself. Those days were done, but to outline how we prevent it from happening again. I stood at the end of that long table with people who used to feel like distant gods of decision-making, and I spoke like I speak in procurement meetings. Clear, boring, factual. Me. Fraud thrives in ambiguity. We remove ambiguity. We standardize bids. We enforce disclosure. We require written approvals. We audit thresholds. We protect whistleblowers. We stop letting urgency be an excuse. A board member asked, "Do you believe this could happen again?" I looked around the room. Me. If you treat this as Victor's problem, yes. If you treat it as a system problem, no. They approved the remediation budget. They approved structural changes. They approved a new reporting line for procurement compliance. And then they asked me if I wanted to stay long-term. That's when I told them the truth. Me. I'm proud of what we're building. But my family has been through a lot. I'm not sure I can keep living inside this story. The chair nodded, almost sadly, like he understood he was asking someone to keep carrying a weight the company should have prevented in the first place. 2 months later, I resigned, on good terms, and launched my consulting firm. I expected backlash. I expected Victor to keep trying. Instead, what happened was something I can only describe as quiet vindication. Clients came, not a flood, but a steady stream of companies that had been burned, scared, or suspicious. Companies that wanted someone who could see patterns and wasn't afraid to write things down. My first contract was with a nonprofit that had a favorite vendor problem. My second was with a manufacturing firm where their procurement lead had been too friendly with a supplier. My third was with a hospital system that had invoices so vague they looked like poems. Every time, the work was the same. Remove ambiguity, force transparency, build controls, protect the ethical people. And every time, I thought about how close I'd come to losing everything because one man had a network and a taste for cruelty. I also got one last message from Victor. It arrived late at night, months after I'd left the company. Victor, email, you think you won, but you'll always be the guy who made trouble. I stared at it for a while, not with anger, with a kind of tired pity. Then I forwarded it to my attorney and archived it because that's what I do. And I went back to bed next to Claire, who had stopped checking the locks twice. Because I had learned something Victor never understood. Trouble isn't the person who points at the rot. Trouble is the rot. And records are the only thing that don't flinch. Edit 5, continue Fallout it is. This is the part where the cartel stops acting like a unified monster and starts acting like a bucket of crabs. When Victor got fired, I expected the vendors to scatter. What I didn't expect was how fast they turn on each other. Because a cartel isn't loyalty. It's convenience. It's a group of people agreeing to pretend a lie is normal, as long as the money keeps flowing and the risk stays theoretical. The second the risk becomes real, the lie becomes a weapon. It started the morning after the first debarment notices went out. My phone rang at 7:06 a.m. Unknown number. Me, hello. Voice. Is this Alfred? I need to talk to you. Me, who is this? Voice, doesn't matter. Look, Victor is gone, right? Me, yes. Voice, then I can help you. But you need to understand something. We weren't the only ones. That was the first time I heard the phrase that would become the theme of the next few weeks. You're looking at the wrong vendor. They all said it. Every single one. Like it was scripted. They weren't denying fraud. They were negotiating for who got blamed for it. Legal sent out formal notice of breach / request for substantiation packages. They were polite, deadly documents. Prove your work, prove your prices, prove your independence, prove your ownership. We didn't send them because we wanted to be mean. We sent them because once you put the request in writing, liars have to pick a lane. And the vendors picked lanes like people fleeing a sinking ship. Vendor, we did the work. Ask Vendor B. They were the ones coordinating. Vendor B, we only submitted bids. Vendor C wrote the bid packages. Vendor C, we were instructed by Victor. This is on the company. Everyone suddenly wanted to be the helpful one. Everyone suddenly had concerns. Everyone suddenly remembered details with astonishing clarity, as long as those details pointed away from themselves. Sam Audit called me and said, if I didn't know better, I'd think we accidentally discovered a hobbyist club for perjury. I said, we didn't discover it. We just turned on the lights. One vendor, small, aggressive, always smug, tried to play dumb. They sent back a packet of documentation with pages of supporting evidence. That was basically, trust us. Outside counsel asked one simple follow-up question. Please provide the original bid drafts, including version history. The vendor replied, we don't keep drafts. Outside counsel replied, interesting, because the PDF metadata indicates the file was created on the same machine as another vendor's bid. That's when the vendor's tone changed. Not apologetic, not scared, angry. They call me directly. Vendor owner, you're overreaching. Me, direct calls are inappropriate. Put it in writing. Vendor owner, we can make this easy. Me, put it in writing. Vendor owner, you think you're protected now? I hung up, documented it, forwarded it. And then, because people like this always test boundaries, they tried another angle. They called my old co-workers. I found out because Beth finally grew a spine and came to my office looking shaken. Beth, Alfred, Northbridge called me. Me, what did they say? Beth, they asked if you were still involved. They wanted to know who you report to. They said you're making enemies. That's the part that still makes my skin crawl. The vendors felt entitled to probe inside our company like they own hallways. Like Victor had given them keys. So he tightened controls immediately. No vendor contact without procurement copied. No direct calls to staff. Must go through a monitored line. Violations documented as escalation evidence for debarment. The vendors hated it, which is how you know it worked. Around week 2, The word settlement started floating through leadership like perfume. Not loudly, not officially, but you could feel it. Because here's the dirty secret. Even when a company is the victim, it still wants the mess to be quiet. Executives don't like headlines. They don't like board minutes turning into subpoenas. They don't like vendors retaliating in public. They like closures, preferably sealed. So yes, there were discussions about negotiating repayment with certain vendors in exchange for cooperation. And that's when the vendors started bargaining like criminals at a poker table. Vendor rep, to counsel, we'll repay if you don't report us. Counsel, we're not trading accountability for cash. Vendor rep, then why are we talking? Counsel, because you want a chance to reduce damage, not erase it. Some vendors offered repayment schedules. Some offered discount credits. Some offered to help identify wrongdoing. Translation, we will snitch. The cartel was now a room of people pointing at each other, hoping the finger pointing would count as absolution. It didn't. This was the moment that made me laugh, and then immediately stop laughing because it was so brazen. A vendor I'll call Stonegate requested a repair meeting. They claimed they had documentation to clear up confusion. Legal told me I could attend as a procurement lead with counsel present. We met in a conference room with glass walls, visible on purpose. Counsel on one side, me on the other. Stonegate's rep, a man with 2 white teeth and 2 smooth confidence, sat across from us. He slid a folder across the table. Stonegate rep, we want to cooperate. Counsel, then please explain the pricing variance and the bid independence concerns. Stonegate rep, of course. But first, Alfred, I want to say something. He turned to me like we were old friends. Stonegate rep, I know you've been through a lot. Me? I'm fine. Stonegate rep, you shouldn't have had to carry this burden alone. Me? Okay. He leaned in slightly. Stonegate rep, I want to help you move forward. Then he placed a business card on the table. Normal card. Normal font. Except it was thick, thicker than it should be. And under the card, barely visible, was the corner of a folded piece of paper. Counsel's eyes narrowed. Stonegate rep smiled. Stonegate rep, consider it a gesture. For your trouble. I didn't touch it. I didn't blink. I just looked at counsel and said calmly, Me, did you see that? Counsel reached over, lifted the card with a pen, not a hand, and unfolded the paper. It was a cashier's check, not a gift card, not an oops. A cashier's check with an amount so large it felt like an insult and a confession in the same breath. Counsel stared at it for 1 second, then looked at Stonegate rep. Counsel, are you attempting to bribe a procurement officer in the presence of legal counsel? Stonegate rep's smile faltered for the first time. Stonegate rep, no, it's not. Counsel, then what is it? Stonegate rep tried to laugh. Stonegate rep, it's goodwill. Counsel slid the check into an evidence envelope like she'd done it 1,000 times. Counsel, meeting is over. Stonegate rep, wait. Counsel, cold, we will be adding this to the record. Stonegate rep stood too fast, chair scraping. Stonegate rep, you're making a mistake. Meh, no, you are. He leaned close enough that I could smell his cologne. Stonegate rep, Lo, Victor protected you from how this world works. Me, Lo, Victor is gone. And so are you. He left. Furious. Humiliated. 2 days later, Stonegate received an immediate termination notice and a debarment action recommendation that basically read, Thank you for the demonstration. It was the most satisfying try again I've ever witnessed. After Stonegate, the other vendors got jittery. One vendor's CFO requested a proffer meeting. That's fancy legal language for, we want to confess strategically. They showed up with a spreadsheet. A literal spreadsheet. Vendor CFO. Here's every inflated invoice. Here's every split PO. Here's the extra margins. Here's what Victor asked for. I remember staring at the sheet thinking, you robbed us, and the thing that finally makes you honest is fear of someone else robbing you back. They explained the mechanics. Victor would hint that relationships matter. Vendors were expected to create room in pricing. The room funded kickbacks through consulting invoices to shell entities. If a vendor didn't play, they mysteriously stopped winning bids. If they did play, They got emergency work routed to them without competition. The CFO didn't call it extortion, but it was. Then another vendor showed up and lied so badly it was almost performance art. Vendor owner: we never communicated with Victor outside formal channels. Counsel: do you recognize this email thread from your personal Gmail? Vendor owner: counsel: do you recognize this invoice to Hale Advisory Solutions? Vendor owner: that's not. Counsel: which is registered to your mailing address. That vendor left the meeting looking like a deflated balloon. And later, we discovered they had tried to destroy records, deleting emails, losing drafts, wiping devices. People always forget you can delete your side of the story, but you can't delete the other side's inbox. Records don't need permission to exist. Remember the planted gift card? The anonymous complaint? The fact that HR couldn't produce chain of custody? Well, when outside counsel started reviewing HR's role, they asked for a specific set of documents. Internal notes, meeting records, complaint intake logs. HR produced an incomplete set. Classic move. So counsel requested them again. Officially. This time, IT pulled back-end records, logs, metadata. And that's when we found the HR oops that basically cooked their credibility. The anonymous complaint had been entered from HR's own workstation. Not from a hotline. Not from an external source. From inside HR. With a timestamp that aligned perfectly with the day Denise took the envelope from me and handled it. There it was. A planted accusation, laundered through HR, used to justify retaliatory action. When the audit committee saw that, the tone shifted from remediation to reckoning. I wasn't happy about it. I wasn't cheering. I just felt this heavy, vindicated sadness. Because the truth was worse than I'd feared. It wasn't just Victor. It was permission. A week before I resigned, my phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Me hello. Voice tired. Northbridge. There was no swagger this time. No intimidación. Just exhaustion. Northbridge rep. We're done. We're cooperating. Me, put in writing. Northbridge rep. We will. Me, then do it. Northbridge rep. Can I ask you something? Meh. No. Northbridge rep. Just, why didn't you take the easy way? I looked out my office window at the parking lot, at people walking to their cars like they'd never had to choose between safety and integrity. Me, because the easy way was built on someone else getting hurt. He was quiet for a moment. Northbridge rep. Victor told us you'd fold. Me, he was wrong. Northbridge rep. Yeah, a breath, he was. Then he hung up. By the time I left Harrogate, the cartel was ashes. Vendors debarred or under repayment agreements. Conflict of interest policies rebuilt. Bid processes standardized and audited. HR leadership shaken and restructured. Board oversight strengthened. Audit committee empowered to bypass management interference. And me? I walked out without bitterness. I walked out with something Victor could never steal. A reputation built on proof. The funny part is, people still sometimes ask me if I won. Winning would have been never needing to fight. But in the world we live in, where some people mistake power for permission, I'll take the second best kind of winning. The kind where the bully learns that the quiet person in the corner wasn't weak. They were just collecting evidence. Edit 6, Epilogue. This is the part where the adrenaline drains out and you find out what kind of person you became while you were busy surviving. I didn't launch my consulting firm with fireworks or a triumphant LinkedIn post. I launched it the way I did everything after Victor. Quietly, cleanly, and in writing. I filed the paperwork. I set up a business bank account. I built a simple website that said what I do without sounding like a villain. Procurement integrity. Vendor risk. Controls that work. Claire helped me pick a logo. My kids argued about fonts like it mattered more than everything we'd been through. For the first time in months, the arguments in our house were normal, stupid, harmless, safe. But safety, I learned, isn't just the absence of threat. It's the return of small things. The first Monday, I didn't have to open my work email. I still woke up at 5:30 a.m. with my chest tight. My body didn't believe freedom yet. It had learned to schedule for fear and didn't know how to unlearn it. Claire found me in the kitchen, staring at nothing, coffee cooling in my hands. Claire, you're doing it again. Me? Doing what? Claire, listening for the other shoe. I swallowed. Me? I don't know how to stop. Claire, then don't stop all at once. Just breathe. She put her hand on my shoulder, firm, grounding. Claire, we're not in that building anymore. That sentence hit like sunlight. We're not in that building anymore. My first real client was a nonprofit with a favorite vendor problem. They called it a relationship. I called it a risk. They didn't love that. They wanted me to validate their discomfort without forcing them to confront the ugly parts. They wanted the comfort of best practices without the inconvenience of change. I did what I always do. I asked for data. Vendor list. 3 years of invoices. Bid files. Approval chain. Conflict disclosures. Communication logs. The executive director, warm smile, nervous eyes, said, "Do we really need all that? We trust our people." I nodded gently. Me. Trust is wonderful. Controls are kinder. She blinked. Me. Controls protect honest people from suspicion and dishonest people from opportunity. They gave me the data, and within 2 days, I found the same old music playing under new lyrics. Recurring invoices with vague line items. PO split just under approval thresholds. A vendor who always won because the RFP was written like a key cut for one lock. Nothing huge yet, but big fraud doesn't start huge. It starts tolerated. When I presented my findings, the room was silent in that way that says everyone feels it, but no one wants to name it. I offered a remediation plan. Rebid, tighten language, enforce disclosure, require written justifications, set audit triggers. The board chair cleared his throat. Board chair, this is a lot. Me, it's a lot because you've been letting it grow. He didn't like that, but he signed the engagement extension anyway. Because people like results more than they like being told the truth. And I was very good at being the kind of truth that comes with a path out. This happened on my third client, and it was the moment I realized Victor hadn't just changed my career. He had changed my nervous system. The client was a manufacturing firm, fast-moving, old school. We don't have time for paperwork energy. They hired me after a competitor got hit with a procurement scandal, and their CEO suddenly developed an interest in ethics like it was a new vitamin. I was there to review their vendor selection process for a major equipment upgrade. Day 2, after a long workshop, the COO pulled me aside. COO, Alfred, you're doing good work. Me, thank you. COO, I want to make sure we don't waste time. One of these vendors is the obvious choice. Me, then they'll win fairly. COO, smiling sure. But you know how it is. There are ways to make things smoother. He handed me his phone. COO, text me your personal email. I didn't take it. I just looked at him. Meh, no. COO what? Me, all communications stay on official channels. COO, Alfred, come on. Meh, no. His smile stiffened. COO, you're being difficult. Me, I'm being consistent. He leaned closer like he was sharing a secret. COO, there's a bonus in it for you if we wrap this up clean. A bonus. I felt my stomach drop, the same cold as the gift card on my desk. My body reacted before my brain, because trauma is a faster reader than logic. But my voice stayed calm. Me, put that in writing. His face changed instantly. COO, I didn't mean it like that. Me, then it won't be hard to put it in writing. COO, you're twisting my words. Meh, no, I'm clarifying them. He stepped back, offended. COO, forget it. I nodded once. Me, I will. Then I did what consulting taught me to do. I protected myself without making a scene. I went back to my hotel room, opened my laptop, and wrote a memo to file with date and time and exact wording. I emailed it to myself on my business account. I also sent a short note to the CEO, copying their legal counsel, framed as a policy reminder. Me, email during today's discussions. I want to reiterate that my role requires strict independence and all communications must remain on official channels. This protects both the company and the engagement. No accusation, no emotion, just a boundary with a paper trail. The CEO replied 10 minutes later. CO, understood. Thank you for flagging. The next morning, the COO avoided me like I was contagious. Good, because the engagement wasn't about making friends. It was about preventing the kind of rot that destroys companies and families. The real epilogue isn't the firm. It's my house. A few months after I resigned, we were sitting at the dinner table and my youngest asked casually, "Dad, do you like your new job better?" The question landed like a stone in water, because I realized my kids had felt it. Even when we tried to hide it, they had lived inside the tension with us. I looked at Claire, and her eyes were on me, careful. I answered honestly, "Me, I like that I don't have to be afraid at work anymore." My kid nodded like that made perfect sense, then went back to asking for dessert. Later that night, Claire and I sat on the couch while the house went quiet. "Claire, I want to tell you something." "Me? Okay." "Claire, I've been waiting for the day I stopped scanning parking lots." "Me," and Claire's voice shook a little, but she smiled through it. "Claire, today I realized I didn't scan." I swallowed hard. "Me? You didn't?" "Clyde, no. I just walked to the car." That was the moment I understood what safe actually means. It's not the dramatic relief of an ending. It's the return of ordinary. I took her hand. "Me? I'm sorry it took so long." "Claire, I'm not sorry you didn't fold." "Me? I almost did." "Claire, but you didn't." She leaned her head on my shoulder. "Claire, you were right about one thing." "Me? Only one." Claire, a small laugh. "Records don't flinch." I stared at the dark window, the reflection of our living room soft behind it, and I thought about Victor's last message. "You'll always be the guy who made trouble." Maybe I was, but not the kind of trouble he meant. Because trouble, the good kind, has a purpose. It's the trouble that makes predators uncomfortable. It's the trouble that reminds systems they have rules. It's the trouble that gives quiet people permission to speak. A year later, I was invited to speak at a small compliance conference. Nothing flashy, just a room full of people who'd seen enough to know that ethics is not a poster. It's a structure. Someone asked during Q&A, "What's the single most important lesson you learned?" I didn't even have to think. "Me, never fight a network with vibes." Laughter. "Me, fight it with documentation, policy, and a timeline so clear it makes liars sound tired." After the talk, a young procurement analyst approached me with a nervous smile. Analyst, "I think something's wrong where I work." "Me, do you have it in writing?" Analyst, "Not yet." "Me, start today." They nodded like I'd handed them a flashlight. And as they walked away, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not revenge, not victory, peace. Because in the end, the most satisfying part wasn't watching Victor fall. It was watching fear lose its grip on my home. Edit 7. Bonus update, I didn't think I'd ever hear Victor's name again in a way that made me laugh. I was wrong. About 9 months after I left Harrogate, I was in my home office, real office, not hallway exile, with a door I could close because I wanted quiet, not because someone wanted me isolated, when a message popped up on LinkedIn. It was from Martin, the same director who once told me, "I can't look at your folder," because he was scared. His profile picture looked the same. His tone didn't. "Martin, hey Alfred, I owe you an apology. Also, I have something you should see." I stared at the screen for a full minute before replying. Not because I was dramatic, because when someone who stayed quiet suddenly reaches out, it usually means one of two things. 1, they grew conscience. 2, they got a reason to be afraid. "Me, what is it?" He sent a screenshot. A press release style post from a mid-tier logistics company announcing their new hire. Victor Hale, Senior Director, Strategic Sourcing and Vendor Partnerships. The caption was full of corporate sparkle. Proven leader, relationship builder, drives operational excellence. The kind of language that means absolutely nothing until it's too late. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel panic. I felt a cold, familiar clarity. Because predators don't stop being predators. They just change rooms. Martin's next message came in fast. "Martin, he's telling people he left Harrogate because of a political misunderstanding. He's saying you were a disgruntled employee." There it was. The narrative. The last weapon Victor always reached for when the receipts beat him. Make the truth look like drama. "Me, why are you telling me this now?" Martin, "Because he reached out to me." "Me, for what?" Martin, "References. Vendeur contact. He wants names." My jaw tightened. Of course he did. Victor didn't want to rebuild from scratch. He wanted to plug into another ecosystem and start feeding again. Martin hesitated, then typed, Martin, and because he mentioned your name, he said, Alfred is the kind of person who will ruin you if you let him. I sat back in my chair and actually laughed once, short, incredulous. Because if you ever want proof a liar knows the truth, watch what they warn others about. Victor wasn't warning them I was dishonest. He was warning them I was documented. Martin asked if we could talk on the phone. I agreed, but I set a boundary like I always do now. Me, fine. After, I'll summarize an email. He sighed like he understood exactly why. When we spoke, Martin's voice sounded older. Martin, he's the same Alfred. Me, I assumed. Martin, he's already asking for introductions to vendors. Specifically the ones who used to work with us. Me, that's not surprising. Martin, what is surprising is some of them are answering. That hit harder than I expected. Not because it meant Victor still had influence, but because it meant the vendor world is exactly what I learned it is. Relationship-based, convenience-based, and often morality-flexible if the money looks right. Martin lowered his voice. Martin, one of the vendors told me Victor is offering them preferred access at his new company if they keep their mouths shut about the past. I went still. Me, did they put that in writing? Martin, no, it was a call. Me, then it's a rumor. Martin, but Alfred, it sounds like him. It did. It sounded like Victor trying to rebuild a cartel with the same bricks. And then Martin dropped the real bombshell. Martin, he also asked if Harrogate ever reported him. Me, reported him, where? Martin, he didn't say. He just kept asking if there was anything official out there. Like he was scared of something catching up. Scared. Victor didn't fear consequences because he had morals. He feared consequences because he knew they were deserved. I didn't go on a crusade. I didn't start calling Victor's new employer. That's not how you win clean. But I did something I'm now professionally very good at. I control my side of the truth. I spoke to my attorney and asked one question. What am I allowed to say, factually, if asked for reference or verification? The answer was simple. Stick to verifiable facts, documented outcomes, and avoid speculation. So I prepared a short, neutral statement, something that reads like a weather report, not a vendetta. I was involved in a significant procurement compliance matter at Harrogate. An independent audit and outside counsel review substantiated serious procurement and conflict of interest violations. Policy and governance changes were implemented. I am unable to share confidential details. Boring. Bloodless. True. Then I did nothing until the universe handed me the funniest little karmic boomerang. 2 weeks after Martin sent the screenshot, I got an email from a vendor I hadn't heard from since the fallout. One of the former cartel vendors who had cooperated once things got hot. Subject, quick question. Body, hi Alfred. Hope you're well. We heard Victor is at new company. Are you aware? Do you know if he's safe to work with? I stared at the email like it was a time capsule. These people wanted me, the person they once tried to intimidate, to tell them whether a known problem was safe to partner with. I replied with a single sentence. Me, I recommend you rely on documented due diligence and conflict of interest disclosures. That was it. No warnings. No drama. Just do your homework. 10 minutes later, the vendor replied. Vendor, understood. Thank you. And that's when it clicked. Victor's greatest weakness wasn't that he was cruel. It was that he left behind too many witnesses. The vendor world might tolerate shady behavior when it's profitable, but vendors are also terrified of being the one holding the bag when the lights come on. Once you've been part of a scandal, you don't want to be part of another. You start asking questions. And when vendors start asking questions, cartel builders get hungry and angry. Here's the part one can share without pretending I have access to confidential HR details. 3 months after that shiny announcement, Victor's LinkedIn went quiet. No more posts. No more thrilled to join. No more celebratory comments from his new colleagues. Then Martin messaged me again. Martin, it's happening. Me, what is? Martin, he's gone. Apparently, Victor's new employer started doing routine vendor onboarding, conflict of interest forms, basic compliance checks. One vendor refused to work with him outright and flagged prior issues. Another quietly asked legal, is this the same Victor from Harrogate? Someone, maybe Martin, maybe a vendor, maybe someone with a conscience and a file, provided enough information for the company to realize they'd hired a walking liability. Not because they cared about ethics as a concept, because they care about risk. Victor didn't get to settle in. He didn't get to rebuild a network. He didn't get to start feeding. He got cut off at the door. Martin didn't sound triumphant when he told me. He sounded relieved. Martin, I should have listened to you the first time. Me, you're listening now. Martin, I'm sorry. Me, I know. We hung up, and I sat in my quiet office listening to the normal sounds of my house. Dishwasher humming, distant laughter, a dog barking at nothing important. I thought about the hook quote that started all of this. You're lucky I hired you. You're unlucky I kept records. And I realized the deepest satisfaction wasn't Victor losing job after job. It was watching the world slowly become less hospitable to his kind of power. Because once a record exists, it doesn't care how charming you are. It just sits there, waiting. If you want more true Reddit-style corporate justice stories with receipts, meltdowns, and satisfying endings, like, subscribe, and drop receipts in the comments. It helps the channel a ton.